I was standing in the hospital waiting room when my phone buzzed with the text that would change everything. Hals, your story just won a Pulitzer. Congratulations. The irony wasn't lost on me, achieving my greatest professional triumph while watching my personal life flatline on a cardiac monitor. My best friend lay unconscious behind sliding doors, and here I was, suddenly the toast of journalism. The antiseptic smell burned my nostrils as I slumped against the wall, ignoring the buzz of congratulatory messages flooding my phone. Rain pelted against the windows, providing a fitting soundtrack to my misery. I'm Violet Williams, investigative journalist for the Baton Rouge Chronicle, and I've spent my career digging for other people's truths while burying my own. Ens Williams? The editor's voice crackled through my phone. When me to discuss your next assignment. The Meridian Corporation story. Board thinks it could be even bigger than the one that just won. I watched a doctor rush past, clipboard in hand, shoes squeaking against the polished floor. My friend might be dying, Greg. I'm sorry about your friend, truly. But corruption doesn't take sick days. Neither do journalists who want to stay relevant. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, matching the static in my brain. At 32, I'd learned that success always demanded sacrifice. But whose sacrifice, and for what? We need an inside source, Greg continued, unbothered by my silence. Someone within Meridian who can confirm the financial irregularities. The connection to city officials. Without that, we've got nothing publishable. My fingers traced the edge of the waiting room chair, feeling the places where the vinyl had cracked and been inexpertly repaired. Just like people, I thought. We all have our broken places poorly stitched together. Give me 2 weeks, I said finally, knowing I should ask for more time but wouldn't. I'll find someone. After hanging up, I pressed my forehead against the cold window glass. Outside, the storm had transformed Baton Rouge into a blurry watercolor, streets glistening under streetlights. My reflection stared back, green eyes ringed with exhaustion, black hair pulled back so severely it looked painted on. I barely recognized myself anymore. 3 days of dead ends followed. My usual sources clammed up at the mere mention of Meridian Corporation. Whatever was happening there had people scared, which only made me more determined. But determination doesn't equal results, and by Friday, I was drowning in frustration and coffee dregs that tasted like liquid disappointment. That's when I made the decision. Some might call it impulsive, I called it necessary. I threw clothes into a duffel bag, grabbed my laptop, and pointed my ancient Honda toward the Gulf Coast. Sometimes the only way to find clarity is to change your surroundings. As I drove away from the city lights, the tension in my shoulders began to unwind like a tightly coiled spring finally released. The highway stretched before me, a ribbon of possibility curling toward the horizon. I rolled down the windows, letting in air that tasted of salt and promise. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was literally running away from a story about people running away with money. But sometimes distance provides perspective. That's what I told myself anyway. What I couldn't have known then was that this impulsive road trip wouldn't just clear my head, it would completely rewrite my story. And the source I was so desperately seeking wasn't hiding in corporate offices or secret meetings. She was heading toward me on that very same coastal highway, with secrets of her own and blue eyes that would see right through all my carefully constructed walls. The sky darkened as I drove east along the Gulf Coast, transforming from moody gray to threatening black within minutes. My tired Honda protested as I pushed it faster, hoping to outrun the storm. No such luck. The first fat raindrops hit my windshield like warning shots. Come on, I muttered, squinting through the increasingly violent downpour. The wipers worked overtime, barely keeping pace with nature's assault. Lightning cracked open the sky, briefly illuminating a road sign, small coastal town 2 miles ahead. Perfect timing, as my car chose that exact moment to make a sickening grinding noise. The engine light flashed, then died. Then everything died. I coasted to the shoulder just as another lightning bolt illuminated my surroundings. Scrubby pines, empty road, and sheets of relentless rain. Cell service, non-existent. Of course. I was contemplating my bad life choices when headlights appeared behind me, slowing as they approached. In my line of work, strangers on deserted roads during storms triggered warning bells. But beggars can't be choosers, especially drenched ones with dead cars. The vehicle, a well-maintained older Jeep, pulled alongside. The passenger window lowered, revealing a woman about my age, blonde hair escaping from her hastily tied ponytail. "Car trouble?" she called over the rain. Her voice held the slight lilt of someone who'd worked hard to shed their southern accent, but hadn't quite succeeded. Just decided to park here and enjoy the ambiance, I replied, already soaked to the skin. She laughed, a genuine sound that somehow cut through the storm noise. Hop in unless you're particularly attached to pneumonia. Inside her Jeep was blissfully dry. I dripped all over her upholstery as she handed me a clean towel without comment. Faust, Megan Roberts, she said, extending her hand. Her grip was firm, fingers slightly calloused. Working hands, I noted automatically, journalist brain categorizing details. Violet Williams, I replied, taking in her appearance. Striking blue eyes set in a face that seemed perpetually ready to smile. The kind of beauty that sneaks up on you rather than announcing itself. You're not from around here, she observed, pulling back onto the empty road. Baton Rouge, I said, deliberately vague. I just needed to clear my head. And hurricanes usually have the opposite effect, she quipped, navigating the flooding road with impressive skill. And there's a mechanic in town who owes me a favor. We'll get your car towed in the morning. We reached a small inn that looked like it had been plucked from a New England postcard and inexplicably dropped on the Gulf Coast. Megan seemed familiar with the proprietor, who offered us the last 2 available rooms. Where are you headed? I asked over a dinner of surprisingly good seafood chowder in the inn's small dining room. Back to Baton Rouge eventually, she said. Something in her voice made my journalist radar ping. Taking the scenic route. What a coincidence, I said, watching her reaction carefully. And I'm headed back that way too. A flash of something, calculation, concern, crossed her face before she smiled. Oh, we could travel together if you'd like. Once your car's fixed. Safety in numbers, right? Later, sitting on the inn's covered porch watching the storm, we traded sanitized versions of our lives. I was just a writer working on a project. She was just a financial consultant taking some time off. Both of us were clearly hiding something. The air between us hummed with unspoken questions. The rain created a private bubble around us, and for the first time in years, I felt the dangerous pull of genuine connection. When lightning illuminated her profile, I caught her watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Our hands rested inches apart on the porch swing. The distance felt both vast and negligible. You know, she said softly, sometimes the best journeys happen when plans fall apart. The next morning brought sunshine, bird calls, and news that my car would need parts that wouldn't arrive for days. Megan's offer to drive together suddenly seemed like fate rather than convenience. As we loaded my bag into her Jeep, our hands brushed. She paused, then impulsively leaned forward and kissed my cheek, so quickly I might have imagined it. For luck, she said, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. Intro trips need good luck. That evening, sitting beside a small campfire on a deserted beach, listening to her stories that revealed everything and nothing, I realized I was falling into something I couldn't control. Something that had nothing to do with my assignment. What I didn't know yet was that choosing to travel with Megan wasn't just a detour from my investigation. She was the investigation. I just didn't know it yet. 3 days of coastal driving with Megan felt like living in a parallel universe. One where deadlines and corruption investigations didn't exist. We took detours to hidden beaches, ate at roadside shacks serving the best seafood I'd ever tasted, and shared the kind of conversations that happen when 2 strangers know they'll never see each other again. Or so I thought. The spell broke when my phone regained service just outside Baton Rouge. 17 missed calls from my editor, plus 1 cryptic text Meridian Corp announcing major restructuring tomorrow. Need you back now. Reality crashed back like a cold wave. I glanced at Megan, who was humming along to the radio, one hand draped casually out the window, catching the wind. I'd told her I was a writer, not specifically a journalist, certainly not one investigating corporate corruption. Everything okay? She asked, noticing my sudden tension. Work emergency, I said, watching her closely. I need to get back right away. Was it my imagination, or did her knuckles whiten slightly on the steering wheel? No problem. I need to get back to real life too, she said, too casually. When she dropped me at my apartment, our goodbye was awkward, neither a promise to stay in touch nor a clean break. Just unfinished business hanging in the air between us. Thanks for the rescue and the ride, I said. Thanks for the company, she replied, then hesitated like she wanted to say more. Instead, she just smiled and drove away. I spent the night catching up on developments at Meridian Corporation. The restructuring announcement smelled like a preemptive move, someone trying to get ahead of potentially damaging revelations. I needed that inside source more desperately than ever. The next morning, I positioned myself across from Meridian's glass headquarters, nursing a coffee and observing employees arriving for work. A familiar Jeep pulled into the underground parking garage. My coffee suddenly tasted bitter. I told myself it could be coincidence. Baton Rouge wasn't that big, but it wasn't that small either. Maybe she was visiting someone. Maybe she had business there. But when I accessed the company directory through a contact in HR, there she was, Megan Roberts, Financial Analytics Department. The universe has a sick sense of humor. Of all the women to rescue stranded journalists during thunderstorms, I had to find the one who worked for the very company I was investigating. For 3 days, I debated what to do. Professional ethics dictated I maintain distance from potential sources. But something about our connection felt genuine, or was that just what she wanted me to think? Had our meeting been engineered? Was I being played? On the 4th day, I followed her after work. Instead of heading home, she drove to a small coffee shop in a neighborhood I avoided in my reporting. Too many politicians and corporate executives lived nearby. Too many people who'd recognize me. Through the window, I watched her meet with a man I recognized as Meridian's CFO. Their conversation looked intense. Papers exchanged hands. When she left 30 minutes later, her expression was grim. 2 days after that, I tracked her to a bank downtown, where she made what appeared to be a cash deposit. A large one, based on the thickness of the envelope she handed over. My journalist mind constructed scenarios, none of them flattering. Corporate espionage, hush money, offshore accounts. When she visited the same bank 3 days in a row, I couldn't ignore the pattern. Something wasn't right, and whatever connection I thought we'd formed during our journey didn't matter against the possibility of a story this significant. I waited outside her apartment building the next evening. When she saw me leaning against my newly repaired car, her face went through a series of expressions: surprise, pleasure, and then unmistakable fear. "Violet? What are you doing here?" Her voice sounded strained. "And I thought we should talk about your job at Meridian Corporation," I said, watching her carefully. "And those Muse meetings with the CFO, and your frequent bank visits." The color drained from her face. "You've been following me?" "I'm an investigative journalist for the Chronicle," I said, finally laying my cards on the table. "I'm working on a story about financial irregularities at Meridian, with possible connections to city officials." She closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, they shone with unshed tears. Since I should have known. Nothing about that trip was coincidence, was it? "I know our meeting was," I said, surprised by how much I needed that to be true. "Everything after... I don't know anymore." "Then you should come inside," she finally said, her voice barely audible. "No, there are things you need to know. I am an informant, just not yours. At least not yet." As I followed her up the stairs, my heart pounded with conflicting emotions. The thrill of a reporter on the verge of a breakthrough, and the dread of a woman about to learn whether a connection she couldn't stop thinking about had been real or just another source manipulation. What I didn't expect was for Megan to open her apartment door to reveal walls covered with financial documents, news clippings, and photographs. An investigation board that rivaled my own. "And I've been gathering evidence for months," she said, watching my reaction. "But that's not even the biggest secret I'm keeping." I stood in stunned silence, taking in Megan's investigation board. Financial statements, photographs of handshakes between people who shouldn't know each other, documents with highlighted sections showing money flowing to offshore accounts. It was more comprehensive than my own research. "You're investigating Meridian too?" I finally managed. "Why?" Megan sank onto her couch, suddenly looking exhausted. "And I was hired to manage certain financial analytics. Sounds boring, right? Except I started noticing patterns. Money disappearing, then reappearing under different categorizations. Small amounts at first, then larger ones." She gestured toward a coffee pot. I nodded, needing something to do with my hands. The apartment was small but thoughtfully decorated. Bookshelves with financial texts alongside dog-eared paperback novels. A couple of framed nature photographs that I recognized from locations along our road trip. And I reported my concerns through proper channels, she continued, accepting the coffee I handed her, our fingers brushing briefly. And was promptly told to focus on my assigned work. When I persisted, my supervisor took me to lunch and explained how being a team player would benefit my career. Then tried to buy your silence, I said, pieces falling into place. Not tried, succeeded temporarily. Her laugh was hollow, and I took the first bonus, trying to convince myself I was misinterpreting things. The second bonus came with tickets to a financial conference in Europe. The third came with a promotion. I sat beside her on the couch, close enough to smell her citrus shampoo. So what changed? Benet got sloppy. Or I got better at looking. She reached for a folder on her coffee table. 2 months ago, I found direct evidence linking Meridian funds to personal accounts belonging to 3 city council members who approved contracts benefiting the company. Classic pay-to-play. I fought professional jealousy. This was the smoking gun I'd been looking for. And the meetings with the CFO? He's feeling guilty, feeding me information, the cash deposits. She hesitated, her fingers twisting together. That's where it gets complicated. She stood abruptly, pacing to the window before turning back to face me. And I need to know something first. That trip, our time together, was any of it real for you? The question caught me off guard with its vulnerability. Oh, yes, I admitted, surprising myself with my honesty. And more real than I was prepared for. She nodded, seeming to make a decision. And I'm not just gathering evidence against Meridian. I'm saving money. A lot of money. She walked to her laptop, opened a browser, and turned it toward me. On screen was a slick financial advice website featuring a professional-looking woman with auburn hair offering investment strategies. The site had thousands of subscribers. Teammate Finley Frost, financial guru, Megan said flatly. She doesn't exist. I created her using AI programs, stock photos, and my actual financial expertise. I charge for specialized investment advice. I blinked, trying to process this new information. You're running a financial advice scam? No, she said sharply. Untinty advice is solid. My day job literally involves predicting market patterns. Finley's subscribers have averaged 22% returns. It's not illegal, just complete fiction. I finished. Like a pen name for authors, she countered. I need the money, Violet. I need it because the medical procedures I want aren't covered by insurance. I've been saving for gender-affirming surgery. My expression must have shown my surprise because she immediately became defensive. And I'm not lying about who I am. I've always been Megan. But there are aspects of my physical body that don't align with who I know myself to be. I reached for her hand without thinking, and I wasn't judging. I was surprised by how much trust you're placing in me with this information. Her fingers tightened around mine. I've spent my life pretending to be someone I'm not. With you, from the moment we met in that storm. I didn't want to pretend. The realization of how much was at stake for her, professionally and personally, hit me. My story could expose Meridian's corruption, but it could also expose Megan's online persona and potentially her personal journey. We're not so different, I said quietly. We're both after truth, just different kinds. Can we work together? She asked. I use my insider information for your story while protecting my identity and my side project? Professional boundaries screamed in protest, but I found myself nodding. And I'd need to verify everything independently. My editor can't know you're my source until we're ready to publish. I understand, she said, relief evident in her voice. As we spent the next few hours going through her evidence, the line between professional collaboration and personal connection blurred. Our shoulders touched as we leaned over documents. Our fingers brushed exchanging files. The tension between us was charged with something beyond the thrill of investigation. Past midnight, exhaustion finally caught up with us. Megan brought blankets to the couch where I had settled amid scattered papers. Thank you, she said softly, for not walking away when you learned the truth. I reached for her hand, pulling her down beside me. Whatever professional distance I'd intended to maintain evaporated as she leaned toward me. The kiss was tentative at first, then certain, a physical manifestation of the trust we'd just established. As the kiss deepened, I knew I was crossing a line I'd never crossed with a source before. But Megan wasn't just a source anymore, and I wasn't just a journalist. We were two people who had found each other in the middle of separate storms. What I couldn't know then was how those storms would soon converge, threatening everything we were building together. Over the next 3 weeks, Megan and I fell into a rhythm, working together by night, maintaining our separate professional lives by day. The information she provided was journalistic gold, each piece meticulously documented. I spent hours verifying details, building an airtight case against Meridian and their political cronies. Meanwhile, something completely unexpected happened to Megan's alter ego. "Violet, come look at this," Megan called one evening as I let myself into her apartment with the key she'd given me for emergencies. I found her staring at her laptop, face pale. "What's wrong?" I asked, setting down the takeout I'd brought. "Finley Frost just gained 10,000 subscribers in one day." She turned the screen toward me. "So the stock market took a dive yesterday, but followers who took my advice about diversification barely felt it. Now everyone wants Finley's expertise." The numbers were staggering. Her subscriber count had jumped from a respectable 5,000 to over 15,000 overnight. Comments flooded her latest video. "Finley saved my retirement. How did you know this was coming? Please do private consulting." "It's is good, right?" I asked, noticing her troubled expression. More subscribers means more money for your surgery. It's also more visibility, more scrutiny." And she ran her fingers through her blonde hair, a nervous habit I'd come to recognize. "And I created Finley to operate in the shadows. Now she's going viral." Oh. I wrapped my arms around her from behind, resting my chin on her shoulder. "And you've done nothing illegal. Your advice is solid." "But she's not real, Violet. What happens when people want to meet their financial savior in person?" Her concerns proved prophetic. Within days, Finley Frost became the financial world's newest sensation. A market correction that wiped out billions left Finley's followers relatively unscathed, thanks to her earlier warnings about specific sectors. Business channels wanted interviews. Financial publications requested guest columns. And among the new followers was Derek Chambers. His first message seemed innocent enough. "Your advice saved my business. How can I thank you?" Then came daily comments, each more personal than the last. He shared details about his life: divorced investment banker with no children, Midwestern transplant to Baton Rouge, collector of rare books. He began addressing Finley as if they were already friends, then more than friends. "Look at this." Megan showed me his latest message one night. "He wants to fund a startup for me, says he has connections, who would be interested in my insights." I felt an unfamiliar pang, something between concern and jealousy. "And he seems obsessed." "He's harmless," Megan said, though her tone lacked conviction. "I'm just desperate for financial wisdom." I wasn't so sure. As a journalist who had covered stalking cases, something about Derek's escalating attention raised red flags. But I had other concerns. My editor was growing impatient for the Meridian story. And Greg's pressuring me for a draft. I told Megan over dinner the following evening. "And I've got enough to name names in the first article." Her fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Including Meridian executives?" "Phillips and Watkins for sure." "I can't protect your bosses, Meg." "I know." She set down her fork. "And just need to prepare for the fallout. Once they start looking for leaks." I reached across the table for her hand. "One name won't appear anywhere. I promise." That night, as we lay tangled together in her bed, I felt her restlessness. "What are you thinking about?" I murmured against her shoulder. "Derek sent another message," she admitted. He says he knows I need money. Offered $200,000 to meet in person." I propped myself up on one elbow. That's not normal fan behavior. It's not the first time Finley's received generous offers. Her blue eyes met mine in the dim light. "But it's the first time I've been tempted. That's enough for my surgery, Violet. Enough to start over somewhere else after your story breaks." A cold feeling settled in my stomach. You don't know anything about this man. And I know he's been consistently respectful. I know he's verified on several platforms as a legitimate financial advisor. She touched my cheek. "And I know I'd never actually meet him alone. You'd be there too." I wanted to argue further, but my phone buzzed with a text from Greg. "Tom, Draft. Tomorrow. Non-negotiable. The following day, my first article on Meridian Corporation's corruption hit the Chronicle's front page. No executives were named yet, that would come in part 2, but the evidence of financial misconduct was damning. Within hours, Megan called in a panic. When months they're conducting internal interviews, it is checking all communications. I don't think I was careful enough, Violet. They'll trace it back to me. Before I could reassure her, another call beeped through, an unknown number. When I switched over, the voice sent chills down my spine. Ms. Williams, this is Derek Chambers. We haven't met, but I believe you know the woman pretending to be Finley Frost. We should talk about her deception. Soon. My blood ran cold. How had he found me? How had he connected Megan to Finley? And most importantly, what did he want? I need to see Megan now, I told Greg, already grabbing my jacket and keys. And you're not going anywhere, he replied, leaning against my cubicle entrance. A Meridian article is catching fire. The mayor's office is demanding a retraction. This is exactly what we wanted. Someone knows about my source, I hissed, lowering my voice. Until if they expose her before we publish the executive names, and we'll find another source. Greg's voice was maddeningly calm. That's journalism, Williams. You know this. I stared at him, suddenly seeing with perfect clarity the difference between us. To Greg, the story was everything. To me, Megan had become more important than any byline. I'll be back before the afternoon meeting, I lied, already pushing past him. The drive to Meridian's offices was a blur of red lights and honking horns. When I arrived, the lobby was buzzing with unusual activity. Security guards checking badges closely, suits huddled in concerned clusters. My phone rang. Megan. Where are you? I asked immediately. Conference room on 12, she whispered. They're interviewing everyone in my department. Violet, they have my emails. Which emails? My heart hammered. Between departments. Nothing about us or the leak, but they're looking at everyone's communications. I'm next in line for questioning. And out of there, I said. Now. Go to the bathroom, then take the stairs. If I leave, I might as well confess, she argued. Before I could respond, she gasped. Derek just walked in. He's with the executives. How? The call ended abruptly. I tried calling back, straight to voicemail. I sat in my car, mind racing. Derek was inside Meridian, with executives? The pieces suddenly clicked. Derek wasn't just a devoted follower. He was connected to Meridian somehow. Maybe even an investor or consultant who had recognized Megan despite her attempts to disguise in Finley's deafened voice and appearance. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, and know who leaked the documents. Meet me at Riverside Park in 20 minutes if you want to protect her. D. I had no choice. 20 minutes later, I found a well-dressed man in his 40s sitting on a bench overlooking the Mississippi. His appearance matched the profile pictures I'd researched during my frantic drive. Derek Chambers, investment specialist with connections to half the corporate boards in Baton Rouge. Ms. Williams, he said without looking up. When your article was impressively thorough. Where's Megan? I demanded. Safe for now. She left before questioning. Smart woman. He finally turned to face me, though not smart enough to realize her Finley Frost persona had flaws. Voice modulation software can be reversed. AI-generated images leave traces. What do you want? And originally, to meet the brilliant mind behind Finley Frost. His smile didn't reach his eyes, and I genuinely admired her financial insights. When I realized she was fabricated, I was disappointed. So this is about feeling deceived by an internet personality? I couldn't keep the disbelief from my voice. Tent is about recognizing an excellent mind being wasted at a corrupt corporation, he countered. I was prepared to offer Finley, Megan, legitimate backing, real opportunities. And now? Now I know she's your source for the Meridian expose. The executives suspect but can't prove it yet. They will, though. My hands clenched involuntarily. Are you threatening her? Offering her protection, he corrected. My investment firm has been trying to address Meridian's corruption through proper channels for years. Your article finally provides the leverage we needed. I studied him carefully. So, you're one of the good guys? and a businessman who recognizes talent and despises corruption. He handed me a business card. Tell Megan I still want to meet. My offer stands, legitimate backing for her financial insights, no more hiding behind fake personas. As he walked away, my phone rang again. Megan. Where are you? We both asked simultaneously. "Been my apartment," she answered. I climbed down the fire stairs and ran. "Violet, they're searching everyone's desks. Someone from IT mentioned recovering deleted emails." "Ain't just met Derek," I said. "He knows everything, about Finley, about you being my source." Her sharp intake of breath was audible. "Is he going to expose me?" "He claims he wants to help you. Professionally." I hesitated. "I don't trust him, but he could have already turned you in and didn't." When I reached her apartment, Megan was throwing clothes into a suitcase. "I need to disappear for a while," she said, her movements frantic. "Okay, maybe stay with my cousin in Texas." I caught her hands, stilling them. "Running looks like guilt. We need to move faster with the story instead." "Oh, you don't understand," she said, tears forming. "It's not just my job. If this becomes public, everyone will know about Finley, about why I created her, my most private struggles broadcast for public consumption." I pulled her close, feeling her heartbeat racing against mine. "I won't let that happen." She pulled back just enough to meet my eyes, then leaned forward. The kiss held desperation and fear, but also something deeper, trust, perhaps even love. "I never meant to drag you into my chaos," she whispered against my lips. "I'm a journalist. Chaos is my natural habitat." I tried to smile. "We'll finish the story on our terms, Megan, not theirs." What I didn't tell her was the sickening realization I'd had during my conversation with Derek. Someone had to have directed him to me, to make the connection between Megan, Finley, and my article. Someone who knew about our relationship. We had another leak, and this one was personal. The morning after meeting Derek, I submitted the second part of my Meridian exposé to Greg, complete with executive names, dates, and damning financial records. Greg's eyebrows nearly disappeared into his hairline as he read. "This is Pulitzer-worthy, Williams," he said, scrolling through the document. "And I need to know your source will stand behind this if Meridian sues, which they absolutely will." "And my source is solid," I assured him, maintaining my composure despite the knot in my stomach. Megan and I had barely slept, spending the night securing her most important documents and preparing contingency plans. "Solid enough to testify if needed?" he pressed. I hesitated just long enough for Greg's eyes to narrow. "There's something you're not telling me." Before I could formulate a response, my phone buzzed with a news alert. My blood ran cold as I read the headline from a competing business journal. Financial influencer Finley Frost exposed as fraud. Meridian employee behind elaborate scheme. The article included side-by-side photos of Finley, Chana, and Megan, along with screenshots from Finley's subscriber-only content. Worse, it explicitly connected Megan to the recent Meridian leaks, calling her financial advice platform just one of many deceptions perpetrated by a disgruntled employee. What the hell? Greg snatched my phone, his expression darkening as he read. "Is this your source? A woman running an online scam?" My mind raced. This had to be Derek's doing, but why? He'd claimed to want to help Megan, not destroy her. "It's not what it looks like," I said, already gathering my things. "Unrun the story, Greg. Every word is verified independently." "Sit down," he ordered. "You've compromised this paper by using a fraudster as your primary source. The whole investigation could be tainted. And her financial advice platform has nothing to do with the Meridian evidence," I argued. "And it wasn't a scam. She gave legitimate financial advice." "While pretending to be someone else," Greg countered. "Meridian's lawyers will have a field day with this. We need to put the story on hold until legal can review." I knew what on hold meant. Potentially killing the story entirely while Meridian covered their tracks. Without another word, I walked out, ignoring Greg's shouts behind me. Megan wasn't answering her phone. When I reached her apartment, I found her staring at her laptop, face ashen. Her social media accounts were flooded with messages, some supportive, but many viciously attacking her credibility, appearance, even speculating about her gender identity. Derek did this, she whispered when she saw me. And after all his talk about legitimate opportunities. I sat beside her, scanning the worst of the comments. We need to get ahead of this narrative. What? How? Her voice cracked. Oh, my professional reputation is destroyed. My privacy is shattered. And for what? Because I wanted to save money for surgery while helping people financially? Before I could respond, her phone rang. Meridian's legal department. They weren't just firing her, they were threatening criminal charges for corporate espionage and theft of proprietary information. The conversation was brief and devastating. They're sending security to escort me out of the building tomorrow, she said after hanging up. And they're threatening to press charges unless I sign a statement denying everything in your articles. My journalist training warred with my feelings for Megan, and we can fight this. The evidence? Evidence doesn't matter anymore, she stood abruptly. Tay successfully discredited me as an anonymous fraud. No one will believe anything I say now. As if on cue, Derek called. I put him on speaker. See, the truth is out, he said smoothly. It's unfortunate, but perhaps for the best. And you leaked my identity, Megan accused. And after offering to help me, and I offered to help Finley Frost, a brilliant financial mind. Not a corporate spy selling secrets to journalists. His voice hardened. Meridian's executives are my clients. Did you really think I wouldn't protect their interests? You manipulative, I started. Now, he interrupted. I'm still willing to help. Sign the statement Meridian prepared, Megan. Discredit the Chronicle's investigation. I'll personally ensure the charges are dropped, and we can discuss your financial future afterward. The silence after we hung up was deafening. Megan's shoulders slumped in defeat. Maybe I should sign. No. I took her hands in mine. We still have all the evidence. We can take it directly to the district attorney. And who would believe me now? She pulled away, gesturing at her laptop screen where commenters were gleefully tearing apart her reputation. I'm the woman who pretended to be someone else online. Everything I say is suspect. That night, as Megan finally fell into exhausted sleep, I made my decision. I sent every piece of evidence we'd collected to 3 places, the district attorney's office, the FBI's public corruption unit, and a trusted colleague at a national news outlet. Then I wrote my own article. Not about Meridian's corruption, but about Megan Roberts, the financial analyst who created Finley Frost to help others while saving for gender-affirming surgery. I wrote about her followers' financial successes, her accurate market predictions, and the corporate executives who sought to silence her for exposing their crimes. I wasn't sure if any publication would run it, but as I looked at Megan's tear-streaked face in sleep, I knew I had to try. By morning, something unexpected happened. Megan's former followers began posting supportive messages. Many didn't care that Finley wasn't real. They cared that the advice had been solid, the intentions genuine. Well, listen to this, I said, reading from my phone. Finley Frost helped me save enough for my daughter's college. I don't care what she calls herself. I'm grateful. As the messages of support multiplied, a flicker of hope returned to Megan's eyes. 6 months later, I stood at the edge of the same Gulf Coast beach where Megan and I had once shared stories around a campfire. The wind carried the scent of salt and possibility, just as it had that first night. Penny for your thoughts? Megan appeared beside me, her blonde hair whipping around her face. The last months had changed us both, but she looked more at peace than I'd ever seen her. Just remembering our first trip, I said, taking her hand. And you were still a mysterious stranger with too many secrets. And you were just a writer working on a project, she teased, echoing my cover story from those early days. The aftermath of Megan's exposure had unfolded in ways neither of us could have predicted. My article about her, published not by the Chronicle but by a respected national magazine, had resonated deeply with readers. People who had never considered the challenges faced by transgender individuals suddenly saw Megan as a sympathetic figure, a financial expert who used her skills to help others while working toward her own goals. The district attorney's investigation into Meridian had resulted in multiple indictments. Derek Chambers had escaped legal consequences but lost several major clients when his duplicity became public. Greg had eventually published my original exposé with additional corroborating sources, restoring my professional reputation at the Chronicle. Most surprisingly, Megan had received an outpouring of support from her former subscribers. When one follower started a crowdfunding campaign for her surgery, it had reached its goal within 48 hours. Did you ever think we'd end up here? Megan asked, gesturing toward the small coastal rental cottage we'd booked for the weekend, the same one we'd stayed in during that fateful storm. Honestly? No, I admitted. I thought your story would be just another byline. She leaned her head against my shoulder. And I thought you were just another stranded traveler who needed a ride. We walked along the shoreline as the sun began its descent, casting golden light across the waves. Tomorrow we would drive back to Baton Rouge, where Megan had started a legitimate financial consulting business. My latest series on corruption in city contracting was generating buzz about another Pulitzer nomination. Life had moved forward, transformed but unbroken. And I have something for you, I said when we reached a secluded stretch of beach. I pulled a small box from my pocket. Not a ring, not yet, but a promise. Inside was a delicate compass pendant. Megan lifted it with gentle fingers, her blue eyes questioning. And 'cause you helped me find my true direction, I explained. And I met you, I thought the story was all that mattered. You showed me there are more important things than getting the scoop. She turned so I could fasten the necklace around her neck. When she faced me again, her eyes shimmered with emotion. So I have something for you too. From her own pocket she produced 2 plane tickets. For after my final surgery, 2 weeks in a cottage on the California coast. Time to start planning that book you're always talking about writing. I pulled her close, overwhelmed by how far we'd come, and how much further we might go together. I never thanked you properly, she murmured against my shoulder. For what? For believing my story was worth telling, the real story, not just the scandal. I kissed her then, gently at first, then with growing intensity as the setting sun painted the sky in shades of promise. When we finally broke apart, breathless, I rested my forehead against hers. Every good reporter knows to look beyond the headline, I said. And real story is always in the details. The way your eyes light up when you talk about market trends, how you hum when you drive, your absolute certainty that blueberry pancakes are superior to all other breakfast foods. She laughed, the sound carrying across the empty beach. Those details aren't exactly Pulitzer material. No, I agreed, when they're better. They're the story I want to keep learning, chapter by chapter, for as long as you'll let me. As darkness fell, we built another campfire on the same spot where we'd once shared sanitized versions of our lives as strangers. This time, with no secrets between us, we talked about futures instead of pasts, her expanding business, my book ideas, places we wanted to explore together. Under the vast canopy of stars, with the rhythmic sound of waves providing a constant backdrop, I realized that the most powerful stories aren't always those that make the front page. Sometimes they're the quiet ones that unfold between 2 people who found each other in the midst of separate storms and decided to weather the rest together. And ready to head back? Megan asked as the fire burned low. I looked at our intertwined fingers, at the compass gleaming against her skin, at the woman who had become both my best source and my greatest story. No, I said, smiling. I think our journey's just beginning.